We're sorry for that subpar top 10 list. If you couldn't hear online, no one was laughing. In case you're like, there was an audio issue, I didn't hear laughter. No one was, it's okay. Maybe you were at home, and then thank you. So turn to Luke 14, and we'll get to that soon here, but that's on page 848. And feel free to have one of those Bibles for free if you need one. So I'm just going to be honest. At the beginning of the sermon, I'm going to talk about hate a lot, just because I want to be really honest with you. I want to be vulnerable, transparent as a pastor at a place where we value that. But the thing that I hate most in my life, I'm just going to put it out there and be honest with you. The thing that I hate the most in my life is running, okay? I like to stay in shape. I love lifting weights. Runner, I'm kind of a new-ish runner. I was always the fast white kid in my high school, so I like sprinting. But long-distance running, I do not enjoy that at all. In fact, I don't think I'd be overstating to say I hate running. Does anyone else hate running? Okay. Does anyone else still run but hate it? Is there any of those? Okay, cool. All right, so, but I do have a vision that I want to be in shape, and I want to stay in shape. And I'm just like, man, but before the run and during the run, I hate the run. I hate it. Like some people are like, it's so enjoyable. I get to go be outdoors, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I don't really experience any of those things. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And so I hate it so badly that honestly, when I'm running, when I get toward the end of my run, and typically what I'm aiming for is about every other day or 3 times a week, running 5 miles. So since I had pneumonia in late June, I've been struggling to get back to 5 miles, and I just had my first 5-mile run last week since pneumonia. But when I get to the last mile of my run, everything that comes into my vision or that I think about, in my mind, I'm just trying to finish the run, and I think I hate that thing. So if someone walks in my field of vision, they walk in front of me, I hate that person. This is honest to goodness truth. They walk in front of me, I hate that person. The last song that comes on in my run, I hate this song. I hate this band. I hate this rapper. I just hate everything. I see myself in the mirror, and I see the shirt I'm wearing. I hate the shirt. I mean, I'm so angry in the last mile of my run. If I'm working on a sermon, which I always am, my upcoming sermon, I hate that upcoming sermon. I hate it. Sometimes on Mondays when I have Mo Group, my Mo Group is after my run, and I think, I got Mo Group in a few minutes. I hate my Mo Group. I'm sorry, Mo Group, but I think that when I'm at the end of my run, and it's not something in the rest of my life. It's just in those moments when I'm pushing through. Now, recently I told my wife Shannon, who's up here singing, I said, Shannon, one of the greatest compliments I can give you is that you're the first thing that's ever popped into my mind in the end of a run where I'm angry. And you're the first thing that's popped in my mind where Shannon popped in my mind, and I was like, Shannon. And it was like moment of truth right here. I was like, I love that woman. And that's like the only thing that I've thought, I love that. And then I thought soon after that, I was like, what about Jesus? I love Jesus. And it was like, man, it's so hard to really express love during those moments for me. I haven't thought of the kids yet. I have 3 kids, but that might pop up sometime, and I hope you guys make the cut. Man, I hope you make the cut. But because of this, just the dead honesty, I have a note on my iPhone that I've created that are reasons why I run. Like why I don't give up, because I hate it. I kid you not, I hate it. And so I make a list, and it's a long list to remind me of why I want to run when I want to be lazy, when I don't want to run, which is always, okay? So my list is things like it's great for my heart. It burns more calories than anything else I do. I love to lift weights, but running burns a lot more calories than lifting weights. It's just a fact. And so it's a great example for my kids. I feel great afterwards. And the next day, man, the morning after, when I wake up after a good run, I feel incredible. That next morning, my body feels so good. My lower back feels better because I keep extra weight off. I sleep better. I get sick less. And I have this long list that sometimes I'm like, why do I do this? And I open up this note, and I start reading through it. Okay, here's why I keep doing it. Here's why. You know, it takes 10 pounds off when I'm looking at myself on mochurch.tv. All these things, just like all of it. And so when I get to the end of a tough run, sometimes there's 1.5 miles to go. And when I want to give up, I remember that I have specific friends who are also running too. And there's people I've teamed up with mileage goals, different things like that. And I remember that it's hard for them because for me, I think when I'm running, this is harder for me than it is for anyone else in the world. Like no one is having as much difficulty as I am running right now. It hurts me more than anyone. And I have to remind myself, other people run, other people do it, and they continue to do it. And the other thing I remind myself is I just have to take the next step. Like I can't say enough. When I still have more than a mile left and I'm dying, I'm like, just don't think about the fact you have a mile and a quarter to go. Just take the next step. And I think in my mind so many times, just put one foot in front of the other. One foot, just take the next step. And that's the only way I can get through these runs sometime. Now, for many of us, it's a similar thing when we talk about the topic of money or budgeting or finances or debt or the economy. Some of you hate this topic as much as I hate running, right? Like it was extra effort for you to show up this morning because you were like, what series is that? Let me check Facebook or the website. Oh, generous. Wah, wah. And so you really had to work hard to get here this morning. One foot in front of the other, one foot in front. That's how I used to feel about finances, and I really did. But my mind and my attitude has totally changed about it really in the time that we moved to Cleveland and for the years since then. And so the reason so many people probably hate finances and budgeting and money and all this kind of stuff as a topic is because most people in this room carry significant credit card debt. Most people in this room have car payments. A lot of us, our homes are underwater. Maybe we have a student loan or several student loans. And sometimes it just feels so helpless that we just try to ignore it. Like, man, I don't want to focus on how big of a problem that is, how big of an issue it is. So we just try to ignore it and look past it. And we keep spending money on clothes and gadgets and entertainments and vacations and leasing expensive cars. And we just keep moving forward doing those things and try to block out how difficult the financial situation is. Then the church announces, hey, we're going to do a series called GeneroUS. And you're like, oh, what a great idea. I don't feel bad enough about my finances already, Like, who hired this guy to say these painful things to us, okay? And so what? GeneroUS, like that's the last thing on my mind. And I think that's exactly why we need refreshers to talk about this. And so that's the case for many Americans. You're not alone if you feel that way when the topic of money comes up. But most of us, I would venture to say, want to be generous. Like it's in our vision for who we will be in the future, if not right now. And so as individuals, we want to be generous. But then also, the more that we grow as individuals who are generous, the more we grow collectively to be generous as God's church. And so sometimes we have to remember other people are running too. Other people, it's difficult for them. It's not just me, even though I want to quit focusing on how to get my finances in order so that I can be generous. There's other people in this community that have worked through it or are working through it too. And that's so tough to think about when our finances are a mess. And that's why we're doing this 3-week series. So why do we need to talk about this? Well, I've talked about this before in past sermons, so I'm going to abbreviate the why right now. But honestly, because money is a highly spiritual issue. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who are angry at the church. I know there are a lot of sleazy preachers, I hate to say that, but there are, that focus too much on money and all that kind of stuff. I know that's the case, but it doesn't change the fact that money is a highly spiritual issue. Jesus talked about finances a lot. And so for me to just respond to our American culture, the American church, and say, I'm not going to talk about money because it's uncomfortable or because it's been perverted, let's be honest, in some teachings, that would not be like Jesus' teaching. It wouldn't be me following in the footsteps of Jesus, who did talk a lot about money. The Bible has so much wisdom about money in it. When Shannon and I moved here to the Cleveland area from the Washington, D.C. area in about 2005, Cleveland was the poorest big city in America. And we felt like that energized us, like, yes, God is calling us to the right place. Like there's challenges there, and we knew and acknowledged this isn't just an economic problem, this is a spiritual problem also. And we don't think we're the silver bullet, we're the answer to it, but just like many people, we're like, maybe we can contribute to helping some people and disciple them or teach them along the way with some financial matters, also showing how it's a spiritual issue. And so bottom line, our society and much of the American church is enslaved by consumerism and debt. People are stressed out, marriages break up because of it, and it's something that keeps us from moving forward spiritually. So it's something that we have to talk about, and frankly, we have to talk about very frequently, just because it's, for some of us, it's the biggest issue in our lives. And so this whole sermon is going to be based on an assumption. And I just want to start with this assumption before we jump into the steps that we're going to get into. The whole sermon is based on an assumption that you understand the importance of having a budget. Now, we've had sermons in the past where we've talked about how to put together a budget and those kinds of things. But without a budget, I can't say this clearly enough, you are doomed to fall deeper and deeper into debt, and you never know how generous you can be if you're living blindly financially. So you have to make this a huge priority. A budget doesn't limit your freedom, as you typically will think, like, oh, budget, I don't want to do that. A budget actually gives you freedom. You know what you have to work with. You know what you can spend and what you shouldn't spend. It gives you so much freedom. Only about 25% of American families operate on a budget, but about 50% say that they want to budget but never get around to it. And so an assumption I have is that probably half of this audience is saying, yes, I want to do that, but I just haven't made it a high enough priority yet. Luke 14, starting with verse 28, Jesus says this. He says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. And it wasn't just that Walmart pulled out. It wasn't just the methane problem. Oh, wait a minute, that's City View. I'm sorry, Jesus didn't say anything about this going on in Garfield Heights. Okay, so if you see something that's built and then doesn't get finished, Garfield Heights, City View, frames of buildings that never got finished, and we're wondering, could that have been a Chick-fil-A? You know what I mean? Like, oh, that might have been a Five Guys in my neighborhood. You know, we'll never know because they didn't finish the tower. Jesus' main point is it's a metaphor, as he's saying, if you're thinking about becoming a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus, count the cost first. Like, that's not saying, hey, I have to decide, am I going to be perfect when I cross this line? No, it's Jesus saying, count the cost of saying, okay, when I become a follower of Jesus, I'm going to default to his leadership about tough decisions. So Jesus is saying, hey, before you become a follower of Jesus, count the cost. And he uses that by giving a positive example of a guy who wants to take on a project, but first sits down and creates a budget to see if he can afford it. He counts the cost. And so I would just recommend that this budget be a zero-based budget, which just means that you're giving every dollar a name, including savings. Where is every dollar going before that month starts? Okay? That's a zero-based budget. Now, there's an author, leadership guru, John Maxwell, who says a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. Okay? It's saying, I'm telling all of my money, all of it, where it's going to go, instead of getting to the end of the month and being like, man, where did it all go? I just don't have any idea. Embrace yourself. To do that, you're going to need to make some cuts, just like the momentum budget cuts for 2019. But remember, cuts are only temporary, okay? You can always make adjustments later down the road. Budget cuts are temporary. So if you need some help with that, here are some great resources online, and we have some past sermons where we've talked about things like that. So in Dave Ramsey's book, which I highly recommend, The Total Money Makeover, Dave Ramsey, financial guru, has a radio show, all that stuff. He suggests some helpful baby steps toward financial peace, and it's incredibly wise and helpful. I didn't know what I was doing with finances until I read this book, and it was very friendly for a person like me who was an idiot about money. I just didn't know any. My family didn't teach me stuff about money, and so I didn't know anything, and this book was really helpful and basic, but extremely practical. So Shannon and I have used it, sometimes more effectively than others, but we've used this to kind of have baby steps to figure out our finances. And the truth is, some of you maybe, how many of you are already familiar with the baby steps Dave Ramsey has? By a round of applause. Okay, so 7. And then A few of you might actually be working through those steps that clap, but for a lot of you, this is the first time you'll have gone through this or heard this stuff and say, man, I needed something practical like that to get me started, and I just needed to get moving forward, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time, to keep plugging through something that I hate. I don't want to work on this. You're with us. We all hate discipline. Whether it's running, whether it's budgeting, we all hate discipline, okay? But it's healthy for us. It's good for your heart, okay? And so I want to buzz through real quickly this morning. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the first couple, but then they're going to pick up the pace. So the first baby step is this. It's your small emergency fund, okay? Very simply, you want to save up till you have $100 or $1,000 in savings. It sounded real easy for a second, didn't it? $1,000 in savings. So here's the deal. If you have debt, during this step, you have permission to just pay minimum payments on your credit cards, for example, during this step. So you want to save up $1,000. If your income's less than $20K a year, then maybe $500 is okay. If it's over $70K a year, maybe you need $2,000 in your small emergency fund, but you need a small emergency fund. And the reason you need it is because one day you're going to have a flat tire. One day your transmission might go out. There's going to be an unexpected pregnancy. There's going to be bad things that happen. You might have to bury a loved one, and what you don't want to do is put it on a credit card with high interest rates. So your small emergency fund is simply to say, when I get a flat tire, I don't have to put it on a credit card. Because that's one of the reasons that we're all so in trouble or have been financially. It keeps you from putting stuff on credit cards. So you need a small emergency fund. So get mad, get crazy, get ticked off in this first month of your plan and say, I'm going to get $1,000 set aside for savings. Most people do this within the first month, because they get hacked off and say, if I'm going to start these steps, I'm going to start them strong. And they just say, I'm going to find $1,000. Now, some of you are going to say, I can't do that. $1,000? Where am I going to find $1,000? You're going to have to want it. You're going to have to get crazy. You're going to have to get nuts. I mean, you're going to have to work your way toward that. Maybe you need to spend less money on Christmas and say, I got a Christmas bonus and I'm going to put toward the small emergency fund. Maybe you're going to need to get a temporary second job or third job and say, I'm going to moonlight for a month or two until I get the small emergency fund. Maybe it's Facebook Marketplace that's going to save your butt, okay? Maybe you're a hoarder, or you have lots of stuff packed away in the basement, attic. I said hoarder, by the way, for those of you who took offense. Like, did he just call me? No, hoarder, okay? So maybe you got stuff collected here and there, and you can sell it. You know, the workout equipment you never use, the old baseball card collection you have, that incredible Beanie Baby collection that's in your attic in plastic bags, some of the stuff that's just sitting around in garage, basement, or attic. My youth minister, when I was in high school, I didn't become a Christian until I was a teenager, but I remember my youth minister, Lee McKinney in Toledo, Ohio, saying that at one season of their life, for a while, he and his wife, Dana, only ate peanut butter and jelly so that they could get their finances in order. That's a good plan to me. I really like peanut butter and jelly. But I don't know if he meant lunch and dinner, but I know it was like a major thing that they leaned into because they had to save money and they had to get their finances in order. So baby step one is small emergency fund. Get mad, get crazy, get that vein popping out of your forehead like you're drinking a McDonald's milkshake. Get angry and say, I'm going to get this fund. And focus. It's one step at a time. But Dan, there's so much more I got to get to. One step at a time. One foot in front of the other. You got to run angry right now. Okay? I hate that I don't have money set aside so when I get a flat tire, I got to put it on a credit card. Get mad. Baby step two. Kill your debt. Why not just eliminate your debt? Because you want to shoot it right in the head. Kill it. Okay? Get mad and kill your debt. So in the U.S., the average student loan is just under $29,000 right now, okay? The average car loan has just recently hit an all-time high at more than $30,000, okay? That kicks in the average monthly payment for a car to be past the $500 a month mark, Okay, that is huge. And so it's no wonder why people have to rely so much on credit cards to get by, because you put mortgage and rent there, you get a $500+ a month payment on a car, and you just start putting things in place. Insurance, because that's cheap, okay? You just start putting these things, and you're like, man, now we're down to putting stuff on credit cards and stuff like that, which, by the way, the average balance of a credit card is more than $15,000. And there are more than 1.4 billion open credit cards in the United States. 1.4 billion credit cards that are open, to which we all say, oy vey. I mean, that's huge. Romans 13:8 says this in Scripture: let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. So handle your debts. Don't owe anyone. Work through your debt. So step 2 is killing all of your debt, paying off all your personal debt except for your home mortgage. We're going to save that till later. So Shannon and I, we use the famous debt snowball that Dave Ramsey suggests, and it's become famous now, and have kind of worked through that. And this is how that works. The first thing you need to do is find an extra $200 a month to begin your debt snowball. It's going to take a budget to do this. That's an assumption. So $200 a month. Now you might ask, where am I going to find an extra $200 a month? Well, again, you got to get crazy. If you're serious about this, you will find the $200 a month, okay? You get an extra job or two temporarily. Have a yard sale. Cancel Netflix, Hulu, cable, any of that stuff. Stop eating out. Only buy clothes when you need them. If you need to for a time, brew your own coffee and don't go to Starbucks ever, okay? Decrease the data plan on your cell phone, or sell your smartphone and say, I'm going to use a flip phone as long as I need to for a while, and this is what I'm going to do to get crazy and seriously eliminate my debt. If you're like, I can't live with a flip phone, then you're going to stay in debt if you're struggling with debt. So you really have to make sacrifices. Honestly, some of you might need to get crazier than that, because I have friends who tell me their stories and are like, man, we are so in debt, and it's a crazy amount of money. You might have to get crazy and sell your car and get a less expensive car. You might have to sell your house and move into a smaller one to say, we're never going to get our arms around this until we get nuts and we do this stuff. I don't know how you're going to do it, but in the words of Rob Schneider, you can do it, okay? You just have to get at it and get angry about it. So when you found another $200 a month in your budget, list your debt starting with the smallest debt up to the largest debt. Now, we're in America, so let's be honest. The screen's only so big. Picture there are more line items that keep getting bigger than the $1,600 one, right? So this is just where we're starting. Start with the smallest one, start there. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your $200 a month and you're going to add it to the minimum payment that you're paying for your Target credit card, and you're going to say, okay, now I have $250 a month to start putting toward Target. That's going to take 2 months to knock this one out. That will give you kind of the momentum and I'm seeing fruit, okay? 2 months, and you can move forward now to your Lowe's card from racking up things from remodeling your kitchen and all that kind of stuff, and say, okay, here we go. Now I have the minimum payment for this that I can add to the $250 I was paying, and there's the snowball. It just begins to build. So in 3 months, this one's knocked out. Then your mom will be like, oh, you're finally going to pay me back? Okay? And a lot of moms in the room are like, oh, amen, preach it, name of Jesus. Wow. You know, this get people excited right here. So you pay back your parents, and you start chipping away at that, and you add that to the snowball. Maybe you'd already committed to paying a certain amount back to them. I'm going to give you $200 a month, okay, Mom? Well, now you can add to that debt snowball and start knocking that out, and you can take care of that. And so the point is, you have to keep moving forward and building this snowball. And the formula is simple. The deeper you sacrifice, the faster you'll get out of debt, and the more likely that you actually will make it out of debt. You're going to have to sacrifice up front to get mad about the amount of debt that you have and to just attack it ruthlessly. Dave Ramsey says, and I love this, he says, if your broke friends aren't making fun of you and your relatives don't think you need counseling, then you're not on track. Because people are going to need to look at you and see that's kind of weird. We said we're going to meet together at Boston Market, or we're going to meet together at Five Guys, and you packed a lunch? I've been there, man, for dieting purpose or for budgeting purposes. Like I show up with my ham sandwich sometimes. Socially awkward. It is. People think I need counseling sometimes when I might do that. But there was a time where I really needed to do that kind of stuff. And so I say, you can do it. Get mad, get crazy. Just focus on one step at a time and say, I got to put one foot in front of the other till I eliminate debt. Baby step 3, and now we're going to move faster through these points. At this point, you need a large emergency fund. So at this point, the only debt you have is your home, and now it should be easier to chip away at the rest of your emergency funds because all those minimum payments are gone, all that stuff is gone. So you want to save 3 to 6 months of your essential expenses as a large emergency fund, okay? But you're going to want to keep that money in a simple money market or a bank account, basically somewhere, because it needs to be liquid. You need to be able to get this money quickly if there's a big emergency that happens. So do not invest it. Because if you invest it, then there's going to be penalties to take it out, and you're not going to want to do that. You're not going to want to take penalties. So you want to keep it somewhere where it's liquid in case of an emergency. Proverbs 6:6-8 says this. Take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. Learn from their ways and become wise. Even though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter. And so the point here is the ants work to save and prepare for lean seasons. And basically Proverbs 6 says, take a lesson from them. Like, learn from their ways and become wise. I mean, if you knew there was any chance that the chief breadwinner in your home might get injured, I mean, if you knew there was any chance that the economy might tank hard, if you knew there was any chance your vehicle might crap out, if you knew there was any chance that your basement might flood, or that your grandchild or someone from your extended family might need to move in with you so you can care for them, don't you think God would instruct you to say, be wise like the ants, like save, plan accordingly? That's why baby step number 3, the large emergency fund, is so important. Dan, how in the world could I set aside, I'm just going to make up a number, $10,000 for a large emergency fund? One step at a time. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep working forward with the baby steps. Baby step number 4, invest 15% into retirement savings. Now, research shows that 58% of Americans are saving for retirement. So that means 42% of Americans aren't saving anything. Okay, 42% are saving nothing. And among the 58% who are, only 1 in 10 save 15% or more, which is the recommended number, and upwards from there. So, and listen to this. This is the worst stat, okay? The worst stat is that the average American saves, catch this, negative 2.2% of their income. The average American, that's all of us combined, it adds up to. So that means there's some people who are saving diligently, but there's some people so far on the other spectrum that we average out to negative 2.2% of our income being saved. Compare that to the Japanese, who on average save, on average, 18.2%. So that means there's some real freeloaders in there who are saving only like 5%, and there's some people way above 18.2 who are averaging that out. Like, that's crazy. That's how much the Japanese save. And so I'd like to announce that Shannon and I have concluded that God is calling us to explore international adoption, all right? Because we're just thinking, man, I think we need to adopt like a little Japanese girl who knows how to handle finances, because Americans don't. Okay, so from then on, my son Zion, his job will be take out the garbage. My daughter Aslan will be like feed and bathe the dog, and then we'll have our cute little Japanese girl who will do our finances, all right? That's what we're looking at. All right, so 15%, I know, what? For real Journey, my son is like, we're adopting? Just play, it's just for the sermon. It's just to keep their interest because we're talking about money. Okay, so now you're going to dig into your budget and you're going to fight for 15% of your income. And I'm going to fight for this microphone to stay where I want it on my ear. Now, Look at it. It's like doing this. It's so rebellious. It's like that cowlick you have in your hair, okay, that just won't stay down, alfalfa. Okay. So you're going to fight for 15%, but man, you're going to have to fight hard. Like, this is extremely difficult. It's one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. You're going to have to fight hard to get 15% of your gross household income into retirement plans. If your company that you work for offers a match of 3%, you're going to want to take that first because that's 100% return immediately. Then into Roth IRAs. Then you're going to want to continue to max out your 401ks, traditional IRAs. Then you're going to go to your H to the ISOs, V to the ISAs. I mean, you're just going to want to keep working through. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. That's Jay-Z. And so step number 4 is invest 15% into retirement savings, but focus one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. Number 5, spend a short time on this. Dave Ramsey says now and only now is the time to start college funds. You're going to feel guilty about putting away 15% of your retirement for yourself, basically, as you have not yet gotten to your college funds. You're not going to want to do that till you complete step number 4. Don't let those big brown eyes persuade you, okay? Keep plugging away at your retirement plan first, because it's the old airplane oxygen mask analogy. When the airplane masks, the oxygen masks drop down, you first put on your own mask, right? Okay, you put it on first so that you can help others around you put on their mask. That's not our intuition as a parent, for instance, okay? Like, no, that drops down. I'm helping my kid. Put on your mask first, then you can help all 7 of your children, all right? You can get to work and put masks on all of them, but first you got to put on your own mask. So focus, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. I hate this. I hate making so many sacrifices. Now I got to send my kids to college. I know, but just keep working the plan. Keep working the system. Baby step number 6, this one would feel so good. Pay off your home early. Oh, doesn't it just sound so pretty? It just sounds so pretty, okay? Like, it may be a few years or several years before you get to the step, but when you do, you'll be able to knock out that house debt pretty quickly because you don't have credit card debt. You don't have these things, so you can start chipping away, paying extra towards your house. Focus on one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. And then you'll be ready for baby step number 7, Dave's last step, which is this: build wealth and give. Okay, so Dave Ramsey says, now let's get rich. So rich that we spend our time trying to give it all away. With no payments and great basic savings plan in place, there's nothing left to do but build wealth and give it away. He says, at this point you can invest in real estate or more mutual funds, other opportunities that arise. Some $100,000 deal that can be bought for $50,000 pops up and you can show up and pay in cash. I just want to put a side note, I'm not at this step, okay? I just want to be clear. I'm not going to make you applaud if you are, but I want to applaud you, okay? Because that is just like, man, that's where we'd all love to get. No mortgage left, and we could be generous if we get to that 7th step, okay? Now, I have a friend who I met this summer just to talk through finances with, and I drove down to Canton. He looks like Santa Claus. His name's Gary. He's just one of these lovable guys, and I kind of consider him a financial Batman. He disciples me in matters of finance when I need to send him a text. And so in this case, I want to sit down with him, talk to him about finance stuff. And we talked. Gary's retired, and he, as a volunteer, he co-leads the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University elective at his church. And so he knows a lot about finances. He's a really sharp dude. But one of the things he said to me, and I've always agreed with this, but it was great to hear my Batman say it to me, is he said, man, I love Dave Ramsey's baby steps. I think Dave Ramsey's, he's awesome. He said, the only thing I don't like about the Financial Peace University elective is that Dave waits to the very end to talk about generosity. And I was like, man, I've always thought that. I think I've said that, maybe even on stage in the past. I totally agree. Because FPU, that's not offensive. It's Financial Peace University. But FPU, it waits to talk about generosity. Out of 9 weeks, guess which week they talk about it? Week 9. It's the very last one where it's the great misunderstanding, unleashing the power of generous giving. Now, this is a big deal. Why? Because week 1, most people who signed up for the class show up. Week 2, not so much. Week 3, even fewer. Week 9, That's the fewest people that are going to be there for when Dave goes on his kick about generosity and how great it is to be generous. And Dave's a Christian. He's a generous dude. And Dave believes it's important to be generous from the beginning of the baby steps and all throughout, not just at the end. I know that's his own personal practice, but Dave doesn't reveal that to the end of the class. Why is that a big deal? Well, let me throw a wrench in this whole system for my last point. For those who love and follow Jesus, we're going to take every one of those baby steps and we're going to bump them down just one more step later. And we're going to add one new baby step. And the baby step is this. Baby step number one for followers of Jesus should be something called first fruits tithing. Okay? So basically, this is the deal. God has taught people that generosity based on faith is always the first step in financial matters. So God began teaching thousands of years ago generosity to his people by teaching them to first start with something called a tithe. Now, a tithe basically means a tenth or a tenth part. And so Malachi 3 in Scripture says this, God speaking. He says, bring the whole tithe or the whole tenth into the storehouse. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. By the way, God doesn't say test me in a whole lot of things. But he says, test me in this and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Okay? Now, typically, I think when we're not being generous to God, I think we practice something that I would call tipping versus tithing. Okay? And this is a really easy thing to get into because you can easily justify it. But tithing is saying, by faith, God, I trust you with my finances. Like, it's by faith. There's no other way. But by faith, God, I trust you with my finances. By giving you 10% of what you've given me, I'm acknowledging that all 100% of it comes from you. I'm trusting that when I take this step of faith, that you're going to continue to faithfully provide for me as I sacrifice what feels like something that I shouldn't be able to sacrifice, and I give this to you. It puts me in a trust position with God. So that's what tithing says. Tipping is really when we get in a mindset to say, God, you have served me well. Here's $10, here's $20, here's $50. Go buy yourself something nice, right? Like, here you go, God. Here's a little bit for you. And it's not anywhere close to trusting God with the whole tithe of saying, God, I fully trust that you are the one that provides for me. And so I give this back to you. And the other principle that God has taught people since ancient times is the first part of this, which is called first fruits. First fruits basically it means the first part or the best part in some situations. So the first part or the best part. So not only, catch this, not only did God's people give at least 10% back to God to fully trust him, it was the first 10%, the best 10%. Okay, that's kind of mind-boggling. Makes this even a bigger faith issue. Now, I'll explain what that means in a minute. But Proverbs 3, 5 through 6 says this. It's kind of something that some people might have as a plaque or a poster on their wall. Some people memorize it if they went to church when they were young. But it says this, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Okay, so a lot of us, if we know this verse, think of this verse, we love this verse, because trust is something so hard to put teeth to, all right? What does it mean to trust? What does it mean to really trust someone or God? But trust is something that's very action-oriented. I trust you with this thing, so maybe I delegate this thing to you if I trust you. So trust is a big deal. Well, trust, as it's fully pictured, you go a few verses later and we get one example of what that looks like. Trust in action. It says this in verse 9, just a few verses later. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. And so God's basically saying, this is one of the ways that you trust me, and it's one of the biggest ways because finances are so difficult and scary, and because people teaching about it have perverted it a lot. And so sometimes we use as an excuse not to trust the fact that there's a crooked preacher out there somewhere. And so we say, okay, well now I don't know that I trust the church. I don't know that I trust. And we use that as an excuse not to be generous to God. And God's saying, trust me. Like put faith, it's a faith thing for sure, but trust me with your heart. Give first fruits, give the best, give the first back to God. Now, for people in ancient times, when God told this to his people in ancient times, it was basically this picture right here. It was that they basically in ancient times had crops, for example, that would come in, and it was the first crop, the first tenth of the crop that they would give to God and put in the storehouse to give to God. And the thing about that is that was interesting is you didn't know if the rest of the crop was going to come in. You were saying, I'm going to give this to you, God, not knowing if we will have this food that we need to eat and to sell to others, to barter for other things that we need. So we're going to give you the first tenth that comes in from this crop. And it was an act of trust in the Lord and that he would be faithful to provide. And it was a statement to say, God won't get leftovers. God's not going to be given my leftovers. He gets the first and the best, and I'm going to give generously to him. So now for us, for example, the Smiths, we tithe, and that's our first priority in our budget. We say, man, we're going to start with this, and everything is going to come after that in our budget. And if we're ever going to go to budget cuts, we're not going to look at the tithe line as here's the place we're going to cut from, that we've decided that's the first fruit. That's the first thing that we're going to give to God. And so first fruit tithing means giving the first tenth of our income before, in our mind, mortgage, that's important. Before groceries, that's important. That's essential. Before date night, which is huge to us. Before vacations, before Christmas gifts, before Netflix, before Hulu, before concerts that we want to go to, before Browns games that we want to go to, before pay-per-view events, all that stuff. Even mathematically for us, before taxes, even though we don't see that, like we don't get that money given to us and we give it back to the government, we say mathematically we're going to give to God before taxes even. And the last place we would look to cut would be from tithing first fruits to God. And so I think as a follower of Jesus, figuring out first fruits tithing is a higher priority baby step than a small emergency fund, than a large emergency fund, than eliminating debt. All these things that we've been talking through is to invest in mutual funds for retirement. And I want to say to you, if you're someone who has worked through that and sat down and said, God, I want to take a step to trust you, to put faith in you, and to acknowledge that it all comes from you, I personally just want to say thank you to you for making that sacrifice. And I want to applaud you and say, I'm so proud of the fact that you have put that kind of faith in God, because that's the way God gets his work done through the church in a practical way. Does God need your money? No, but it's the system he set in place by which there's a byproduct of us being able to do ministry to reach people in our neighborhood. And so I'd encourage you, if you're someone who gives generously, you might have to do what I do with running, and you might have to create something on your phone that says, man, sometimes I got to remind myself of why I give. Like sometimes I just have to make a note that says, why do I keep doing this thing that sometimes I hate, and I hate to continue moving forward with this? How do I keep putting one foot in front of the other when your car breaks down, or when the stock market isn't doing well, or when you want to buy a vehicle that you can't afford, and to say, here's why I do that. Dave Ramsey writes this. He says, a question we're frequently asked is this: what about giving or tithing? Where does that fit in the priority? You'll have to decide, he says, for yourself. My personal decision was to tithe first, since first fruits are mentioned over 20 times in Scripture. He said, I've met with many couples who had to choose between giving and necessities, and I refuse to put a guilt trip on you. I want you to decide. And I feel the same way as Dave. It's not to beat people down or to give people a guilt trip. It's just to say, man, I want to see you move forward spiritually. And for some people in the room, the biggest thing they're dealing with might not be finances. But for other people, this might be the biggest spiritual obstacle for you, is dealing with finances and trusting God in that way. And I want you to move forward spiritually with that. And so focus on one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. And I want to just simply really do this. I just want to close by letting some other people tell you, because I know there's a lot of like, I have to break away from what's the motive of the preacher. Can I trust the preacher? Can I trust the church? All that takes time to build trust with a church, with a preacher, whatever. So I just kind of want you to hear some stories from people who are saying, why do I give to God? Like, what's my motivation behind this thing that's extremely difficult to do and then to roll into my small emergency fund, eliminating debt and all those things? So here are a few people sharing their stories. Some people from Momentum and one person that has since moved away, whose name is Dana, that used to be an elder.
The first time I attended Momentum, it was a sermon on money and giving. At the time, I was just checking out churches. I wouldn't even consider myself a Christian. And I thought, oh boy, here's a church that just wants to take my money and see how much they can squeeze out of me. But for some odd reason, I kept coming back to Momentum. I don't know what it was, but I felt at home there.
My wife, Crystal, and I, we often joke about it or often laughed about it. But before coming to Momentum, she attended a church pretty much by herself for 10 years. And when the subject of tithing would come up, which is given 10% of your income to God, I'd often tell her something to the effect that you don't need to tithe. You donate enough of your time, and that's got to be worth something, right?
Tithing is hard, and it's never easy, and I struggle with it as well. But when I am struggling with it, I try to think about why I tithe. And I tithe because I love Jesus and I want other people to experience his love and to also have a relationship with him as well.
I had a roommate who went to a retreat one week. It was just a bunch of college students who went to kind of like a church camp, and they had a guy named Terry Rush who came and spoke to them. And Wayne thought it was such a good retreat that he recorded a portion of it, on the old VHS tapes back in the Stone Age. But I remember watching one of those tapes, and I'll never forget what he had to say. He went to 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6, and it's talking about giving. Whoever sows sparingly reaps sparingly, and whoever sows generously reaps generously. And it's the idea that, like a garden, if you want a lot of plants, if you want to grow a lot of vegetables, you better sow a lot of seed. And Terry challenged us. He says, hey, look, I know you guys are college students, you don't have any money, but you need to make the decision now to be generous. Because being generous has nothing to do with your income. It has to do with your attitude and your willingness to give and your excitement about giving. He said, you need to make that decision now. Because if you make the decision now, you're creating a habit that when you're young, you'll follow when you get older.
A few years after coming to Momentum, they offered an elective course which was called Financial Peace University. It was a 13-week course on how to manage your money. The first thing that I noticed was that I had spent so much money on going out to dinner and eating out. It was embarrassing, to be honest with you. I realized that had I not spent all that money on going out to dinner, I could have given 10% to the church and it would have been pretty much equal amount of money.
In 2012, we started attending Momentum, and slowly but surely we started to donate a little bit more and give a little bit more on Sunday mornings. Eventually we got to the point where it was like, hey, you know what, it's just easier, let's just just do it online. And as time went on and we started giving a little bit more, we never really tithed. It was never really the full 10%. My wife Crystal and I, we kind of had a little bit of a conversation about it and said, my thought was, hey, if we're going to do this Jesus thing and we're gonna say we trust him, then let's trust him all the way. Let's tithe and let's trust him with our finances. So very shortly after that, we started tithing.
I know for many people that starting to follow Jesus begins with going to church. And although Momentum will most likely not reach my family because they don't live nearby, I pray that there are people in that area that are investing and giving generously to their church so that hopefully their church could reach my family and they would start to follow Jesus.
After a few months, I realized pretty quickly that living off of 90% was just as easy as living off of 100%. God asked us to give him control of all of our life and not just some parts of it.
But I was only at a job for probably a little over a year at this point, and I could kind of see the writing on the wall that chances are I was going to get laid off pretty soon. Once I was laid off, I felt that it was just really important that we just continue to give our 10% to God. It's easier to do when things are good. It's a little bit more difficult to do when maybe things aren't so good.
I've seen some of my best friends, including my husband Josh, start following Jesus at Momentum. Some of my best memories include meeting someone for the first time on Sunday morning, inviting them to Mo Group and watching them grow spiritually. And then eventually they start to follow Jesus and are baptized. And I too took the same route, and I'm always eternally thankful for the people at Momentum who were able to trust God with their finances before they even knew who I was, before they knew my name, and even before I lived in Cleveland, so that I would have a place where I could go to learn about God.
We had an opportunity to participate in the multi-site fund here at Momentum, and now we have 2 campuses. We used to be 1, and there's people who didn't know Jesus, that because that happened, they had an opportunity to know Jesus, and many of them have decided to become Christians. And, I've spent money in life, probably like most of us, on things that, some of them worked out great. Others, it's like, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But I've never felt that way about money that I gave to God, to the things that He's involved in. I would just challenge you this morning, if you're thinking about giving and what the scriptures say about giving, take the challenge that Terry gave us, and it's really a biblical challenge out of 2 Corinthians 9, verse 6. Make the decision to give generously. Even now, make a decision to give generously and watch what God's going to do in your life. I promise you, investing in things that are going to outlive you is well worth it. There's nothing that you could put money in this world that's better and more satisfying than that.
Yeah, so, connecting the dots here and why some people give, I think it's great because I think ultimately you get to a point and where God wants you to get to the point of saying, man, I'm no longer putting one foot in front of the other and just hating this as I do it. Like, I hate the sacrifice, but getting to the point where you're a cheerful giver. And God says, man, I want you to learn to be generous and to become a cheerful giver. So with that said, I'm going to pray real quick, and we're going to do communion right after this. So let's pray together. God, thank you that you put people around us in a community that no matter what the issue is, there's somebody who's kind of behind us, there's someone in front of us. There's someone that we can encourage, and there's someone we can be encouraged by. And the same is true with generosity, God. There are so many people around me who have inspired me to be where I'm at spiritually today, but then there's still people ahead of me. There's still people behind me that I encourage. And so, God, just thank you for creating a church that can be generous with the U.S. capitalized, God, that we learn from each other in community for this. And so, God, I just pray that you will help Momentum to continue to be the kind of church that can be a blessing to our community, good news to the people around us, and God, but ultimately first to have faith in you and to trust you in the ways that you ask us to, God. It's in all these things we pray.